therapeutic method called active imagination. And a procedure invented, discovered by Jung, but with a long history before Jung's discovery. It's a procedure, a technique, a method for engaging intensely and intentionally with what's called inner life. It was an allowance of what is maybe not buried, maybe what is already there but not allowed to be there because of our system of thought. Jung was very interested in this association idea of the way the mind associates. But these are figures that don't necessarily respond to association. In other words, if I say green and you say tree, and then, or if you say whatever and another word comes up, these are chains of reaching into what's unknown. But Jung's way was not by provoking in that way, but letting the figures that arrive on their own speak on their own, without provocation and without a chain of association to consciousness or to the inquiring person. That's a big difference. One assumes that the first one with Freud, you can reach it through associations. This leads to this, leads to this, leads to this. But with Jung, it was, this is spontaneous and will speak of its own, in its own way, at its own time. He describes active imagination in one of his books as a systematic exercise for eliminating critical attention, thus producing a vacuum in consciousness. The aim was to allow fantasy free play, and especially to notice how affects or emotions reveal that they carry or are or can be expressed by images. This is one of the most important ideas in all of Jung, that affect and image are on the same scale. And if you want to know what your emotions want, find the image. And your images are emotions in another form. Your emotions are images in another form. Your images are emotions in another form. They are affects. They are fear. They are desire. They are hunger. They are rage. They're anger. And the therapeutic work is the translation of fear into a horrible figure that makes you afraid. The translation of desire into a sexy man or woman whom you want. And then you can do something. What can you do with a sexy desire? What can you do with a trembling fear? But you can do something with a horrible man with a razor blade. You can start talking to him. You can start backing off. You can ask him, what the hell is he doing in your room in the middle of the night? But you can do something there. You can't do anything with cowering in the corner because of the fear. And this theoretical thing in Jung about the image and the emotion being on the same spectrum, two ends of the same spectrum, made it possible to work with emotions in therapy by means of imagery. This systematic exercise for eliminating critical attention, the vacuum in consciousness is very similar to a kind of hypnagogic vision when you first wake in the morning or when you're half asleep and you can feel your consciousness hovering between one state and another when an idea comes through or a dream begins to be remembered. And if you move too quickly or too brightly, you lose it. And you can also sink down into it, come back from it. That vacuum in consciousness is that kind of place, experientially. There's a dimness, a hovering, an openness in the ears, and one hears a voice, somebody saying something, and you don't know whether you said it or your mind said it or what, but the moment you attribute its autonomy, you give it a gift to let it speak further. And he writes in there such things as, imagination is the reproductive or creative activity of the mind in general. Fantasy, as imaginative activity, is the direct expression of psychic life. Now that's giving fantasy primary value. In other words, the energy of the psyche has to show itself somehow, and it shows itself in images. I use the word image, not a psychic reflection of an external object, but a concept derived from poetic usage, a fantasy image. And they appear in space and as voices, but are not pathological as such. There's a huge step in psychology with that, because it's no longer distrusting what the mind does by itself. No longer considered pathological because the voice speaks and it's coming from your throat, it's coming out of your fingers when you're writing, it's coming out of your brush when you're painting, and you're not the agent, you're not control. Essential to this is personifying, or being able to let the voices be people, or be persons, or animals, or creatures, but that they can speak.